Good morning, afternoon or evening. Welcome back to Andertons TV. I'm Ben, I'm here with Alex from Novation. What have you got for us?
Hi, today we're here to talk about the Circuit Mono Station and some of the new updates that we've brought out for it with the latest firmware release. So yeah, without further ado, let's have a look at it.
Oh man.
So the Circuit Mono Station has been out for about a year now, maybe a little bit longer. We've had quite a big firmware update which has just been released, which is kind of major news for us at Novation Towers. So I really wanted to give you an overview today of the unit and kind of what Circuit Mono Station is all about, and then from then on sort of see how the new update can really work alongside an existing setup. One of the things to really note about the Circuit Mono Station is it's got a hell of a lot of attitude, and it really can achieve a lot of different sort of sounds with it. And the new firmware update really brings a lot more kind of functionality and also kind of sound design aspects to it. So I'm a big fan of it. And here we've kind of got a little setup just to show it working with some modular synth activity here, which I'm sure you'll be able to talk about as well. And also we just got a little 08 running here next to just for a bit of extra drums, etc. So we've just connected that up via the MIDI connection. And we'll come back to that in more detail.
Lovely. So I'm a big fan of the whole kind of groove box concept, but I don't really know enough about the circuit half. I know the mono stations, I'm very familiar with the bass station. I think it's kind of based on that, isn't it?
Yes, very similar architecture. So yeah, you're really going to achieve a lovely set of tones out of it, really, yeah. So yeah, the top part of the synth of the Circuit Mono Station here is our kind of our analog synth. So that's one thing that I will definitely sort of talk about initially. So we'll run through that now in just a moment. The bottom section here is our circuit sequencer. So those that are familiar with the Novation circuit, which is again a groove box synthesizer, kind of all-in-one beautiful package. That basically sequencer was a lot of people are a fan of that sequencer. So what we've done here is added it into the bottom of the Circuit Mono Station to be able to sort of easily get ideas down, whether you want to play them using a keyboard, or if you wanted to potentially step sequence those on this bottom row. But again, we'll come to that in a bit more detail as we move forward. So yeah, we were just having a little quick jam, just getting everything connected up. But I think the best thing to do is to really start with just the basic patch, which will be here. So at the top now, if we go through the synth, in fact, I'll go into a vanilla kind of setting if you like.
Was that sort of a shortcut to recall the initialized?
Yeah, so we initialised the patch really with shift and patches there. Nice. And then there's just literally a saw there. So again, we can come to a bit more kind of sound design with it, but then also look at the patches that it comes with. So the top section here, we have the kind of the main synth area. So obviously we've got our master, volume and tempo swing, etc. This is all kind of controlled here. We've then got LFO section with the rate knob in the middle, which gives you visual feedback on the LEDs, which are under most settings. We've also got our wave shape as well, so you can really get quite creative with selecting what LFO you actually want and what shape you want to use.
Is sync tempo sync?
Yes, it is, yeah. So that's quite useful when clocking or working with its internal tempo, which is really
rhythmic
cool.
Type stuff as well.
Yeah, totally. Which again would be pretty good to see that working with some of the modular stuff actually, especially with sample and hold, I'm sure. So next up we've got an envelope. So basically, yeah, we've got one LFO, one envelope, so it's slightly different to the base station sort of architecture. But again, a very useful envelope, nice sharp attack, and really kind of useful when moulding your own sounds completely using that ADSR. We've got the modulation matrix, which is the next sort of section here on the right. Now this is a really, really powerful kind of area of the synth. What's great about the modulation matrix is that you're able to select your different destinations of where you want your different source to go to. So for example, if I wanted to maybe have, I don't know, the LFO, as an example, go to the filter, we select the source as LFO, the destination, which lights up a bit brighter on the LED here, and then we can either go plus or minus to that. So if we just literally just listen to our sound here, let's make the envelope a little shorter, just so you can kind of hear what's going on. So we just got, yeah, very basic saw wave here. We'll come to some more other sort of sounds with it. So again, all I do is select the LFO, and I want the LFO to go to the filter. So you get very quick or kind of a bit more slower. And again, that can be the envelope if you want that to go to the filter. So the way that can then control that. So yeah, quite a useful
Yeah, that's
way of
cool.
being able to kind of start manipulating the different settings without having to necessarily get into sort of automation and things like that.
Something I absolutely hate is sort of menu diving. That's such a clear way of getting through your modulation. That's really nice.
No, it's awesome. So yeah, basically the unit is paraphonic. So it's basically what that means is there's two different oscillators. So when it's purple here, that's oscillator 1. This kind of takes us on to our next section. So we've got our oscillators here. So again, we've got our coarse tuning and fine tuning for oscillator 1 when it's purple. And again, you can change the range. So again, if you want it to be nice and low, 16, 8, 4, and so on. And when you press oscillator 2 now, we've actually got, if I turn paraphonic on so you can hear it, you've actually got a second sequencer there for oscillator 2. So oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, they basically, with paraphonic mode, they will share the same VCA.
Awesome.
So you have to activate the paraphonic mode by holding shift and scale button, which is our paraphonic mode. So when it lights up bright, then that will be our kind of our oscillator 2 activated for that paraphonic play. What's great about that, and I think it's quite useful, is that if you start programming, which we'll do in a mo, no doubt, we start programming out a sequence on the bottom row here with oscillator 2, I can maybe have a slight variation to a lead sound or something like that, and then actually in a live performance, pressing shift and paraphonic or scales, that will then turn it on and off, which is great.
Nice.
So really, really useful. We've got our mixer section here. Now the mixer section will be, again, very self-explanatory really, but they do have visual feedback with the LEDs. So for example...
I'm really enjoying all the lights on here, it's great.
It makes using it in a low light environment like a club or a venue quite useful as well, or a low lit studio. And again, sometimes we'll give you really good visual feedback, like you say, without menu diving. So again, if we turn down oscillator 2, we'll come to that. So oscillator 1 volume, just again on our basic kind of start sound. We've got sub level.
Nice. Oh, that sounds really good, actually.
And then we've got the oscillator 2 to be able to mix in as well.
Is the sub just oscillator 1?
Yes, that's correct, yeah. And then we've also got a noise circuit, which can be bypassed from the filter as well. So you can bypass oscillator 2, noise, or both, or have them as part of the signal.
Really handy if you're using like sine or triangle shapes and you want to keep that low end.
Definitely.
That's cool.
One of the things that I think is quite useful about this workflow as well is the fact that because we've got a step sequencer, all of these parameters here that basically have a pot or a fader, that can all be assigned to per step data. Awesome. So what's really useful is then if I want to start maybe recording some automation, let's just go just to an empty pattern, which again all I did was press patterns there, just to kind of makes it a little easier for us to start talking about it. So let's just turn down the modular, which came straight on, which we'll come to that in a bit. So here we basically have our sort of 16 steps. So let's just do something very basic, just put in a couple of notes. So let's go back to that vanilla patch, if you like, just a saw wave. So now we've gone back to saw wave and just a very basic sequence. So let's start trying to sort of do some manipulation with this now. So get that envelope a bit sharper as well, maybe, I think. Add a bit of sub-level.
Yeah.
Really great sounding synth.
Cool.
So when I'm working with synths, I always try and want to manipulate them as sort of as best I can, really. I'm sure everyone has their own way of working, and there's no right or wrong, as we know. But what I love is kind of getting a little bit of movement with the frequency, for example, or the envelope, just to kind of give a little bit more life to sometimes what can be quite a static lead sound or bass line. So for example, if I press play now, when you start manipulating that, I thought that sounded really cool with the frequency being adjusted. Because we've got the ability to record data to each step within what we've done here, i.e. automation, I can start actually bringing that in. So if I press play and record, see now it's got some LED feedback here as well. So what's nice is I can see there is automation that I've effectively recorded. And again, if I don't like it, I can just press clear and turn it, and it goes red, and I've deleted it. Just so you think, oh, I've made it sound worse or whatever. It's quite a useful way of working. But again, so let's go back to it. So you're just starting kind of get a little bit more play within what's going on with the frequency.
Is there a limit to how many parameters you can have like an automation lane of?
Effectively, I don't think there is. As I said, I've just double checked, but from knowledge, I've never maxed it out. If you like, it doesn't ever stop doing automation.
Getting unmusical before you do
exactly,
that anyway.
Exactly. So, for example, just to give you a couple of let's have a play really. So we've recorded some filter data. Let's do some bit of decay. Maybe now some release. Maybe bring a bit of filter and a bit of release. So I was actually doing more than one sort of manipulation there, and it's recorded those. So yeah, it really, as I said, I personally have never maxed it out, and I said it gets very easy to get creative with. Now, as I said, what I quite like about this as well is that we've got all these pattern modes here. So if I, for example, just duplicate by pressing Shift and the clear button, which is duplicate, I'm just going to duplicate this pattern out now. So I've done 4 copies of that. So pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3, pattern 4.
I
so
assume there's pattern training coming up next.
Well done, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly on point. So we've got our 16 different patterns that we can have up to here. So you could have 1 to 16, or you could have 1 to 4, for example, or 1 to 2. So very similar in the circuit kind of workflow in that sense, that you're able to easily start creating song ideas and whole pieces, if you like. In the same way, again, we've got, for oscillator 2, we've got 8 patterns which are available, which again can be chained, as you said, or just selected on the fly. And the mod sequence, which is the orange one, which we'll come to, this is the section there.
Nice.
So really, really cool. So one thing just more, so with, what I was going with this, so if I create some variation, so let's say, for example, on this 4th pattern, go back into the note mode by pressing note. So now if I just want to have kind of a little flick at the end of that particular phrase, if I go back to patterns, now if I press play. So yeah, it's nice and easy to be able to work with it in that sense. And again, you can also do it on the fly, like I said, by just selecting whichever pattern you want, which is really useful as well. Again, kind of really, when you're performing live and a way of recalling stuff, that can be very, very useful. We go to components.novationmusic.com in Chrome, for example, here, and I want to basically update my circuit monostation. So you can do this at home if you've already got one, or if you already have a unit that hasn't got the 1.2 update. All you do is click Update My Circuit. It gives me an error message, so I won't do that live. That's because I've got a different bootloader on that, I think. So yeah, all of your information that you would want can be saved here. So you can save to the cloud. You can name this My Set.
So when it says pack, does it do all of your presets, all of your sessions, and that'll just one lump?
Exactly that.
Okay,
so
perfect.
it's a nice, useful package which can be saved on SysX, sent via SysX, etc. So it's a really, really useful way of being able to sort of back up and store your patches and sounds. But yeah, if you haven't already, do go to Novation and create your user area, and then you're easily able to start using a lot of this functionality. But again, more information, you can see the links beneath the video. So I wanted to just quickly mention really again on that, say that pattern 1, we'll go back to that. With this automation that we've recorded in, we can also do that, sort of be more clinical and do that on a per step basis. So let's say, for example, here, I'm just going to move this note to there maybe, and I'm going to clear that pattern note. So what I'm going to do here, and this is one of the things that I think when we first released Circuit Monostation, you were able to record this data in, but it'll kind of tie into our new update and what functionality we're bringing. We can start using the noise circuit as an example in this automation. So maybe if we've got our pattern running, I want this to kind of sound like a snare or something like that. So again, if we go into record, if we just press that. Now, on this note, I want to tell it no automation. On this one, I want to have some automation. So now it's glowed red to show visual feedback. And this one, I want no feedback again, so I'll turn it down. No noise into this step. And again, here I don't want it on, but I want it on here. And I want it off here. So effectively now, if we bypass the noise from our filter, which is we're pressing bypass so the noise is lit.
Gotcha.
You can start actually using it to make sounds alongside our kind of bass or lead sound. So again, there's no right or wrong way, but I found that quite a useful trick when we're starting to be a bit more creative, really, with what can be achieved.
So with your one oscillator and then another oscillator, and then doing that kind of thing, you could have the illusion of maybe 4 parts or something.
Exactly that.
Nice.
Yeah, and it kind of really does offer a lot of functionality in that sense. And I think when you see kind of our new patch flip update, which we'll come to once we've kind of gone through the basics of this, you'll hopefully see some more potential again with that workflow. But yeah, really, really good way of using that automation as you work, basically, to get something a bit more unique. So next to our mixer section, we've got our filter section. Now, it's a base station flavoured filter, so it sounds absolutely, fat, for wants for a better word.
Can be polite, but also pretty mean as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think, one of the things that we really love at Novation is the idea of this being an angry kind of little synth, and it really is a filthy sounding synth. So you can have everything from quite sort of subtle, chilled out filtering to, quite aggressive, overdriven, high resonance. Which again, the base station filter is just heard on countless records. It really is a modern classic, or classic, probably the original base station. But as I said, a lot of people really lean on that filter. Really, really useful. And as I said, you got your standard low pass, band pass, and high pass. Your different slope again of resonance. And also next to the filter, we have a distortion as well. So effectively got 2 different types of distortion, with the third type is actually both of those distortions together. So if we start bringing that in, vicious.
It's screaming at you. Brilliant. You stack both together, it goes really mad.
Bring some of that oscillator too in. You turn on the phonic. So it's quite nice, as I said, if you can sort of turn the paraphonic on and off, you kind of get that extra flavour. Really giving you a lot of kind of sonic capabilities with that, and I think that's a really kind of neat way to be quite creative in your performances and also when writing. So one thing I didn't mention, we've got also here is the audio input and also the ring modulation as well. We'll come back to that because we've also said the 08 that we've got connected here, quite a nice way to show that off is to show how you can kind of start using that filter and that distortion unit with processing your own audio. Awesome. So again, maybe you've got a soft synth or something, you don't have lots of other hardware, but you want to kind of add a bit more of that analog kind of vibe and sort of sound and a bit more kind of excitement into your sounds. You effectively inserts it just before the filter and distortion section, so you really can start manipulating a hell of a lot of that external sources as well.
Yeah, it's great. Always like for warming up like digital synths, putting it into an analog filter is going to be brilliant.
For sure, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people were like, it would be really cool if we could do this, and we thought, yeah, it's a great idea, so it was implemented. Yeah. So yeah, really, really good. But again, we'll probably come to that once we've sort of broken this all down. Yeah,
so got a great overview of the kind of the sequencer.
Yes.
Now let's think of it as a groove box. How can it work as the hub that it's being right now?
Yeah, sure. Okay. One thing I will mention, which before we go on to that next section, is under these patterns. So just if some people might be thinking, well, how many can we have? You can basically have these individual sort of 16 patterns for oscillator 1, 8 for the oscillator 2, and 8 for mod sequence. Now, under sessions, this can now be saved all onto here as well.
So that screen that we had of the patterns is that one session will have one of those screens in it.
Exactly that.
Brilliant.
So you can effectively say, for example, we'll go back just to recall anything. Go back to this. So this was a session that I was working on recently. So all of that data is saved. So all the patterns are slightly different. The pattern chaining, everything is the same, stored in that session. So think of a session really as a song, and then the patterns within that session make up your different parts of that song. But again, we'll come to some of the new updates with what can be achieved, which will be really, really good. So yeah, sorry, so to go back to really sort of the next section as well, just before we jump on, is our mod sequence here. So with mod sequence as well, this was a way to be able to start using the pads and steps to basically add, that could be anything, it could be some form of automation. So if all I've done there is selected a step and an amount for each step. So now if we then press play, so I just go back into, let's just select one of the great sounding patches which are built in. So all I did was patch number one. So I'm going to put some note data in now. So if I go to... What I was doing there, so under the mod sequence, on each step I've kind of put individual amounts of level, if you like, on each individual step. So now I'm going to use the mod matrix to maybe assign that sequence by using the source and send that to the filter. So each step that I've put in is actually telling the filter where to move to. So that's kind of where we're at really with the initial release of Circuit Monostation. We do have things like pattern settings as well, which is if I just click here. So again, just to really go through this side menu. So pattern settings is a useful way of controlling the behaviour of the sequencer.
Oh, have we got like sort of randomisation probability and...
Oh, yes.
That's my favourite thing.
Spot on. So in this mode here, this mode with this pink LED, that's forward mode. This is sort of reverse. There's a ping pong, which obviously goes back and forth, and then there's the random, which is really useful. We've also got things which are quite handy in, and you'll probably be well aware of this being a modular guy, is the fact that you're able to change your clock setting as well. So you can speed the clock up or slow it down. So very useful, and that's a really kind of nice way to start, getting a bit more creative with it.
Do you have pattern settings for, like, you've got pattern settings for your mod sequencer as well as your like pitch and everything as well?
Yes, so Oscillator 1, 2 and the mod sequence will have their own settings.
Gotcha.
So really, really handy, again, because sometimes you might want to have the Oscillator 1 just doing a very sort of more structured bass line or something like that, but then you maybe want to kind of lead sound with the Oscillator 2 to, sort of feedback to kind of give a bit more movement. So again, that can do slightly different things to, again, just moving away from that very static kind of boring, patterns, which it's very easy to kind of get stuck in as a producer, I'm sure.
You said Oscillator 1 and 2 share the same VCA, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have like completely independent voices?
No, that's it. So yeah, you have to use the paraphonic mode to basically effectively hear the Oscillator 2 in the output. So yeah, so where are we at to now? So we've also got things like the gate length. So again, if we just go into these notes, we can actually change the gate length. So again, all I've done there is select the note, and I can change that to be, I want it to fill 2. Here I want it to fill 3, so maybe 1, 2, 3. So now that will be a slightly different gate length again. So it's not just static one particular gate length. So.
Nice. A little bit more expression in there. Is there any way of like playing in and recording stuff into the sequencer via like a keyboard or something?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So so really along this section at the top we've got notes. So if I click note, this, let me just go to an empty pattern again, just so we've got something so you can have a play. So we've got these 2 octaves, if you like, here. So that's... So now if we go into Shift and press Note, which is expand, that will now give you a 4-octave keyboard.
Gotcha.
And because we can set what scales we want, that's really useful. So when you go into it, it will kind of help you to make sure that you're within a key that you want to stay within. A scale that you want to stay within, I should say. So by all means, have a little play. So let me just put, let's for example, put that note in there, just so you've got a sort of start point. If you just hit record in the same way you did with the automation, if you want to give it a little play, I'll put the note length in.
Cool. Ooh. Nice.
And again, you've got the way you can up the octave again, like you would on a conventional synth. So again, if you want to kind of add some.
Nice.
So yeah,
it's really immediate. That's great.
Yeah, and if you said people are more of a player, they may find that easier to kind of get ideas down using their hands. And again, it takes it away from the kind of being stuck in a structured sort of way of working. And I think that's what the circuit sequencer offers over other sequences. It's very immediate, and it's kind of has its own flavour, which I think is kind of useful when you're just trying to get ideas down very, very quickly. So that's a really cool feature. And the one that we didn't mention is velocity. So in the same way, again, we've got different velocity options. In the same way, all you do is select the note on the sequencer, which is this bottom row. So it's quite harsh, let's maybe back that off a bit. So we've got different velocity settings there as well, which is really, really useful. And again, that could be used as a source, the velocity.
I was just going to say, you could use it like a second mod sequencer.
Yeah, so if we go into Velocitator to PWM, you know, starting to get a little bit more character within in the riff there. So yeah, really nice way of being able to work with it. So that's pretty much the overview of the Circuit Monostation on its initial release. Now, the big update that we've just announced, and this is what this unit's actually running, and this is available as a free update to all people that have a Circuit Monostation. It's the major update is patch flip. Now, we had some people really, you know, a lot of the users and a lot of the people that were on the beta were like, wouldn't it be cool if you could kind of have different patches changed on each individual step? So instead of just having that step kind of automation like we showed you, it'd be quite cool if you could basically, I don't know, make kind of a bass sound and a lead sound work completely together in that same sequence. So the Novation team really took that a lot further, and they thought, well, okay, obviously it's really fun to be able to make drum sounds with it. So why don't we do the idea of making kind of, I don't know, a percussive or rhythmic kind of sound with the synth, and then basically using that to basically make things like kicks, snares, and then having a bass sound into what's going on. And that really kind of was exciting to a lot of the people in the company, and we really started to push the boundary of what we could do with it. So if we go into just show that off really now, so again what I'll do is I'm just going to select a blank session, which again, these are all multicoloured, that yours probably won't look like that, it's just because of the ones that we were saving. So just so you know, if you wanted to change the colour of a session, all you do is press the save button, and then it will give you the option here to use the octave buttons to change the colour of that. So here we've just, for example, made this one pink, so this is the one we know that we'll be working on. So come out of sessions, we'll go back to the pattern mode. So we've got empty patterns here. So we go to oscillator 1. Now the patches, for example, that first patch we were just using,
it would take quite a long time to like make an individual patch, so we can use some of the pre-done stuff.
We've given some starting point patches, let's call them, which is quite useful. So on the bottom row here, we've got some drum style synthesized sounds. So yeah, if we start now, just basically what I tend to do when I'm using patch flip, I'll hit record and play, so the sequence will be running. I've just recorded some in. So now, without apologies to those thinking, that's not sounding that great at the moment, but it's just a quick way of me to get some ideas from the sounds that I'm going to use. So now we jump back into the sequencer mode by pressing note. So oscillator 1, it's still highlighted here in this sort of purple colour. Now, that's a kick drum. So if we duplicate that now by using the shift and duplicate button here, which is the clear button, and let's duplicate that sort of snare sound to there, and let's clear that one out. That's there, clear that one.
You had a little hi-hatty click thing. That one.
Yeah.
Oh, no, hang on. Where was it?
It might have been another one on there, so let me just go back into patches.
Yeah, just like fill up all the rest with the
So
hi-hat or something.
So I'm just hit play, and that's just a couple of the ideas that are in there. So
nice.
So you know, really interesting way of using patch flip to start actually making basically drum patterns.
Yeah.
So if we go back into this now, okay, so now if we then maybe, so we've got quite a lot of things that we could have in there. So for example, if we find that other bass sort of sound. So all I did there was hit record while the pattern is playing, and then just literally hit the patch under patch play page to select my different patch. Yes, if you've already recorded some of the note data, a way that you can keep those notes but still record the patch flip.
Keep the melody and just add percussion or something.
Exactly that. So if you press play and then hit record, all you do is press shift when you're pressing the patch that you want. So it's just a way that you won't overwrite the sequence that you've already started to work on. Again, you might think, I really like the sound of that, but I want it to use a different bass sound or a different lead sound, but I don't want to lose the great pattern that I spent 10 minutes working on or whatever. So that's quite a useful way of working with that. So I think that's a really kind of neat feature. And again, we'll probably come back to in our sort of performance setup on how we can do that and how we can really utilise it a bit later on alongside the other bits of kit. So if we just hit play again, just like we were saying though on that sort of sequencer mode, I can still record in different step data, whether I actually hit record. You can start, you know, recording in. So all I did there was recorded the resonance on the filter on the first hit to kind of give me a kind of a high sound really there. But again,
a little bit of a squeak.
So maybe we want to do something more interesting with that. So again, press record, press the note that I want to affect. Maybe. Maybe you want to change the velocity, so again we make that full velocity. Maybe we could sound a bit too aggressive, but you know, it's definitely an angry little synth.
Yeah. Is the velocity sequence like pre-assigned to anything, or do you have to go into the mod matrix and sort of send it somewhere?
Not necessarily, but yeah, you can send it where you want using that source data there as well. And again, it is velocity sensitive, so if you do play lightly or, you know...
Oh, well, the pads are velocity sensitive.
Yeah, so you will be able to do that. So yeah, that's quite useful. And again, if we want to start recording some of that automation, instead of doing it per step, throughout each step change, I want to record a different setting, I can... So now again, let's do something with the filter. I found I use this quite a lot in the live sort of setup where I want it to go kind of quite sharp and then I want it to open up more. So hit record and I can get quite sort of fidget with this a little. You know, it's the Circuit Mono Station. It's
brilliant.
You know, it's the fact that you're giving all this additional kind of sound sculpting ability really makes it an interesting product. And it's a massive firmware update for us. And I said it's really been welcomed into my live setup and also in the studio, just because I think I'm getting so much more out of it than just kind of a conventional one sound. You know, I feel like I'm getting almost like a whole song idea out of it straight away.
One thing I really love about the noise engineering modules that we've brought along for the Mono Station to have some friends, it's so immediate. Like you just sort of grab one control and the entire thing goes insane.
Yeah.
There's more depth to the control on the Mono Station, but it's still really immediate and well jammable. It's a groove box, but you can just jam with it.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
No, totally. So I think that probably takes us on to the next section really. So if we just come back to one of the things that I will mention is if we just go to a standard patch, let me just find something else. That's a nice sound, isn't it? So if we then go into note mode again, so let me just select an empty pattern. So all I did was hit patterns and select an empty one. So it just gives us something to work with. So the other second update that we've added with the latest firmware is the fact that we've added a third sequencer. So when I was showing you the mod sequence section, I tried to get across the point of what it initially was sort of designed for, if you like, which was each step can have a different sort of piece of data really on that. So then that mod sequence can then control something like the filter, for example.
Super flexible extra parameter, I suppose.
And that kind of looked like this mode. So you'd select the note and then you select your level, etc. Now, when you now press mod sequence, it will present you with the note mode. So if you look at the oscillator 1, oscillator 2, and now mod sequence, they look very, very similar. So that we've actually added a way of sending out note and gate data via this sequencer, which is the huge update for using it really with Modular. So
awesome.
That's the next step really. But just to kind of give you some backstory, so oscillator 1 initially would have been, so if I hold down this note on the circuit mono station, if you turn up the level now, you should be hearing the bass. So now what we've got going on here is that, just open up some of that decay maybe. So what that's doing is our CV gate section that we've got on the back. So yeah, so we probably didn't go to that section. So we do have CV gate output on the rear, which is obviously useful for hooking up to CV gate compatible synths, but in particular modular synths.
Do you have control over scales and stuff like you do with the other sequences?
Yes, on the mod sequence, yes, we do, the new update. Now, we've got also on there an aux CV, which again, we'll come to that, but that, again, it can be completely assignable to the user, which is really, really useful. So again, that could open something like a filter, and the same way using that modulation matrix, select maybe the LFO, for example, to go to aux CV. That can be something that can be done. And we've also got clock input and output. So what we've got connected up, just to give sort of a bit more info on how we're working with it here, the clock output is going to the clock input on this.
Yeah, Mimetic Digitalis, so that's Noise Engineering's nuts jammable live sequencer.
Cool, well it'd probably be cool to see that working with it. And then, so that, yeah, that's just sending it clock, so that will know when to kind of start playing and in time, etc. And the aux CV, at the moment we've got that hooked up to the decay for this particular bassimilus, but again we'll probably come to that in a moment just when we start playing around with it more. So yeah, where I was going with the oscillator 1, when it was first initially released, the CV gate would just mirror, if you like, the oscillator 1. So it's really cool if you want to start layering up some sounds, etc. But obviously, as we all want more, wouldn't it be great, we thought, if we're going to start adding things like patch flip, where we can maybe start getting some drum sounds going, using the mod sequence as a separate sequencer. So that's where the fun really starts to come in. So major update, again, on our latest firmware, is if I press Shift and Sessions. Now, we presented with this screen where these three are lit. Oscillator 1 is more brightly lit, so that means that oscillator 1 is going to be sent via the CV gate outputs on the rear of the unit. So if we can go oscillator 2, so now the oscillator 2 sequencer will now go out of that. Or if we press mod sequence, now it's got the new third sequencer added, and then that mod sequence output is now going to send a completely separate sequence out when we program it. So
if you're using the mod sequencer coming out the CV and gate, does that mean you can't use it in the modulation matrix?
I believe you can still layer it, but it's just, it's adding with the note data, if you like, is what's coming out of the CV gate. So basically the pitch and the, you know, how long that gate is on for.
Gotcha.
So if we now come into, now for example, let's turn this back up. So that's the patch that we were messing with. Let's just put it back onto the saw just to make it a bit clearer for people listening. Now if I go to mod sequence, you'll hear the fact that I'm now just playing the modular system. Now for oscillator 1. So very, very useful.
Can you play both at once, just get them back in tune quickly?
Yeah, do it please. And if I go back into Shift and Sessions, all I do is select oscillator 1. So. Cool. So if we now start maybe getting some ideas together. So let me just go back into that patch. So just turn off that mode so we're not hearing the bassimilus. So batches again. So just kind of a weird little kind of tough
Tough, that's a good word actually, tough.
And filthy sounding drum rhythm. So now I've turned off the mods, I've turned on the mod sequence to be its own sequencer. So now, for example, if we want to put in some notes, not the best sequence that I've ever written there, but again, we just quickly jump into an empty pattern again. So I'll just hit patterns and go into an empty one. By all means, have a little play. So all we've got really going on there is that sort of percussive style sound. So let's get maybe some automation on that a bit more.
Nice.
Definitely an angry,
Just a
filthy
little bit of a
Wilson.
scream in there,
Yeah,
like percussion noise.
that filter is just beautiful. So yeah, we get that going. Now, for me, let's get kind of like a little bit, something a bit more.
Let's go down an octave, I reckon.
So if I hit play, hit record when you're ready, and have a little jam.
Also not the best thing I've ever done, but it'll do.
I kind of like that though, it's neat. But again, if you like I like the idea of moving stuff around as needed. So let's duplicate that. All I did there was duplicate the notes that you played, and then I basically then cleared that other pattern. So
That's a bit better, nice.
just a bit more groove on that.
Can we shift that note maybe just along a bit?
Yeah, sure.
So you've done that quite a lot. What was the little...
Yeah, sorry to fly through it. So if I want to duplicate that to there, say.
Yeah.
So we press Shift and the clear button, but don't clear it.
Yeah.
Press Shift and clear, and it goes green to say that's the duplicate. So now duplicate that to there, so it goes red. So it lit green to say it's selected, and it's gone red to say, okay, I'll copy it to here. Now again, let's clear by not pressing Shift, just press clear, and then the step that you want to remove, and now we've just copied that over.
Awesome.
So now
There we go. Awesome.
So starting to form a little bit more of an idea of what can be achieved.
Yeah.
So
And we're still only in like just one 16-step pattern.
totally. So again, let's maybe go into that oscillator 2 mode. Let's try and work something out. So we'll turn the paraphonic mode on. So maybe. So we start really getting an idea of what can be achieved. So again, let's go into that pattern behavior really, so pattern settings. So what I did there was go away from our oscillator 1, select mod sequence, select pattern settings here, and now with pattern settings, I can now start adjusting the behavior really of the synth. So if we hit play now.
Pendulum mode, or ping pong, whatever you want to call it.
Wicked.
Cool.
That's really cool. It's kind of doing its own thing. And now I turn the volume down, you've still got it there.
Yeah.
Let's do random, just to really mess with things.
And what's in yellow?
So that's your clock setting. So now if you mess with the clock settings, for example, we can make it go different version.
Gotcha.
Super slow or regular.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it depends on what clock setting you want. But again, quite useful, especially if you're doing more kind of ambient stuff, or you want something to go on a lot slower sequence.
Yeah,
again,
perfect.
really opening up what's achievable with just the 16-step sequence, really, or latching all of the 16 steps together. So the other thing as well, which is quite useful, let's go back into just putting it back to standard clock and standard forward mode. Now, I might want to go to oscillator 1. Instead of having that kind of bit more evolving lead sound, sort of drum sound, we can then say I only want to have step 1.
Oh, so it's like a pattern length thing. Ah, that's cool. Is that, and that you can do this independently for each sequence?
Totally. So that sequence is kind of still running on that a little bit louder. And this is kind of doing its own little interesting thing. And then again we can start.
Or then I guess we could go into...
Which is just really good fun for live, just you're getting that kind of beat repeat, kind of stuttering stuff going on.
One thing that I always like really doing is there was a sequence that I used to have where you could just do make it 7 steps instead of 8, and then it just keeps shifting around, that kind of thing. So for an oscillator 1, was it just like...
so just on pattern settings, and then you've got you can basically tell it that I want it to be 1 or 16 steps long in the sequence.
Then we go to the mod sequence, and then... Let's make it, will that be 15 steps just to be obtuse and annoying?
Go for it,
Really make it shift around and be proper strange.
It's starting to be, kind of, again, not just the run-of-the-mill kind of standard sequencing. That's really, really useful. No, and again, you can randomise that by using the shift mode and mutate as well, which will kind of give you kind of different flavours. Again, really useful in that live kind of setup and using it as a central hub really in your performance.
Yeah, one thing that I'm really enjoying already is I often, with new gear, I always have to sit down, read the manual and, go through all that and like logically work it out. But I'm like picking stuff up from you as you're demoing, so it's really accessible, which is something I really look forward to in that.
No, that's awesome, that really is.
With a lot of modular sequences, there'll be ones where it's only 8 steps long and you can't pattern chain because if you want those, they're massive and really expensive. But this is not an expensive machine. It sounds awesome. You've got that flexibility to create entire songs in there. Yeah. That's actually really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. No, thanks. I mean, genuinely with the sequencer, one of the things that I find personally in my own live setup is the fact that because I can save all of those individual pattern settings, I can actually effectively use this as the brain of my live setup, if you like. So again, working with things like modular systems, my own system, you can easily get lost. And I think one of the things that a lot of people that make modular music will say, and synths that let you kind of not necessarily have a way of preset recalling, you can easily think, well, where am I at with this? But if you're trying to do different song structures, if you know, well, that oscillator should be in that pitch, but then my sequence can be recalled, it's a really, really nice way of being able to kind of have your memory, if you like, for a modular system. And that's one of the things I love to use with it, and I think it really comes into its own as well. And again, same things with like the automation and things like that. One thing we haven't really touched on is that aux CV, so maybe we should have a little play with that.
Yeah, we can get that into the...
further.
We've got it plugged into the decay on Basimilus Eteritas Alter over here.
Yeah, so I think let's save this. I really like this. We'll come back and maybe do a bit of a jam with this one, I think. I really like kind of where we've gone to with this. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to Sessions, and I'm going to save that. So let's just press Sessions. The light here is lit to say that I'm recording that. Just press Save, and I'm going to press Save. It's gone green. I've now saved that. So we turn the unit off, turn up at the gig or turn up at another studio, it will always save, and that's why it's all this kind of multicoloured thing going on here from my other things I've used it with. Now again, let's change its feedback as well here by saying save, and I want this one now to be yellow. So save that. This one is now a kind of off green yellow sort of colour. So now I know that in my set I can go, well, this is track 1, this is track 2. That's 3, 4, whatever. So again, just a really nice way, again, that I personally like to use that colour coding. I kind of do it when I'm working with the DAW as well, just to kind of know that I've got different sections lined up. So that's quite a useful thing. So yeah, the reason I'm saving that, we'll come back to that and sort of have a bit more of a jam. But let's probably, to pick this apart a little bit more, let's just go to, again, to an empty session. And we'll go back to just the standard saw there. So if we now just get this to do something pretty basic. So gate length, I'm going to tell this I want a 16 note. Or no, maybe something like an 8 note. So all that is doing now is having that one note there. So if we want to maybe use the modulation matrix, let's use the LFO source again, just because, and send it to the filter. So remember, if we now turn that up, you'll hear it. I want the LFO to take control of my filter.
Yeah.
Very basic.
Ooh,
nice.
Let's use the sync button.
There you go, yeah.
Does this like do it clock divides when it's in sync
Yes,
mode? Oh,
that's
perfect.
it, yeah. So there we go. So just a really useful way to kind of hear what's going on with that. So the modular system now should be getting signal from that as well.
It is indeed.
So obviously we've got the circuit mono station underneath, but I'll just turn it right down just for the sake of having that there. So again, let's get the maybe decay on there a little bit up just so you can hear. So now let's make sure, so the aux CV now is connected up on this cable, which they're all the same.
Ignore the cable in the rat's nest, but
that rat's nest,
is
the
there.
red things here, that should be it. So let me just double check. Yeah, so aux CV is actually on this one, which is fine. So yeah, so our decay is there. So if instead of us maybe going, if I press play again, instead of us actually going, I want basically the circuit mono station to do that job for me.
Do our jamming.
And one of the things that I think is quite worth noting is that modules can be very, very expensive, but some of them do really interesting things. So the things that you get,
especially the noise engineering ones,
they do some really fantastic stuff. But I think certain things, so for me, that I think like things like envelope and LFOs and useful things, which are really key to synth programming. Circuit mono station will take care of a lot of that kind of thing that you want to do. So you might not necessarily have a massive budget, but things like a really good quality oscillator or something weird and wonderful that you won't get from something more conventional or less conventional as some synths. So I think that's really what, for me, aux CV really comes into its own when you're wanting to manipulate something in your modular system without having to spend hundreds more pounds to do something which actually you've already got a product that will do it.
Yeah.
So really wanted to mention that. So now let's, for example, send that LFO that we've just selected. Well, why don't you do it? So we've selected source.
What I'm going to do, I'm quickly going to swap
Go for
voice just because I'm quicker at getting sounds out of this one.
Go for it.
So let's just quickly tune if that's okay.
Yeah.
That'll do. Awesome.
Cool. Okay, so that's tuned a little more. So if we go back into this mode, so again, I'm just going to turn the filter up. Sorry, the filter automation modulation from the LFO again, so we can hear it. So now, let's turn this down so we only hear, which one is it? The Manus.
This is Manus and Terratas, yeah.
Cool. So that's just sending that very basic 8-step long note. So let's maybe send the aux CV to.
So it's going into the filter on this one at the moment.
Okay, that's useful. So
I think if you wanted to do
idea.
envelopes and stuff, it'd be a bit more audible that way.
So if we can select LFO as the source, so if you just select LFO, and then select the destination,
that magical button. Okay.
And there we go. So now that low pass on the unit is being opened up by the aux CV. And if we layer that in with the circuit mono station, I mean, that's ready to go straight on a track.
That's brilliant.
For me, that really offers a lot of functionality, and I think it's a really, really useful way of manipulating sounds within your rack.
One thing that you don't often get in modular stuff is actually velocity control, so you could use that as well.
Okay,
that's awesome.
Yeah, no, awesome. Useful on a VCA or something like that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So again, if we select, let's say, for example, I want, I don't know, something else to go to the aux CV. So maybe we want, I don't know, part of the sequence to go there, so that mod sequence again. So if we go to, let's see if this will do.
Actually, tell you what, that would be more interesting. Let's put it into Smash.
Cool. So that's sending that velocity data on the mod sequence, and then that's just going to the aux CV, and then we can turn it positive or negative.
Oh, it's cool.
That's really nice.
I think now might be an interesting time to have a gander at the old TR-08 next to it.
Yeah, so just to kind of get to our next step. So what I've done there, so we've actually got the MIDI output. So we've got MIDI in, out, and through on the circuit mono station, which again, some other synths don't necessarily have a through. In a live kind of hub setup, people say, well, I don't want it to be position 1 in my chain of MIDI. I want to be, it to be a central hub, and also maybe if it's clocking, to send that MIDI signal off to something else. So that's very, very useful. So just will mention that makes it quite unique, having MIDI in, out, and through. So all I've got connected up at the moment, so the clock is going to this, which I think maybe we should have that connected to Bacillus, maybe.
We can do that.
That'd be quite cool. So then that's kind of running a sequence to that. And then the other sound that we just manipulated, the Manis, is coming from the circuit mono station. And then the MIDI output is just sending a clock signal to the trusty 08 here, which I'll just quickly clear a pattern.
I'm just clearing it on here as well. Quickly unplug that. I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, and I'm just going to start layering in some drums and then just have a little bit of a jam. Really, and see it kind of in use. So yeah, I mean, it's just a quick way of getting some ideas down. It's just a really kind of fun way of getting working, really. So yeah, all I was doing there was just kind of get a bit of a groove going. But let's maybe try and do something along the idea of the patch flip as well, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah.
So. So I hold that shift button and record. Let's go back into our session quickly, that yellow one, a sec. So let's get we'll change that mod sequence out. So now I've got the kind of patch flip doing some other stuff. So let me just quickly go to oscillator 1. All that kind of rhythmic, kind of interesting analog drums they're coming off the circuit mono station. So now we've opened up the third sequencer by hitting Shift and Sessions. And now, by all means, if you want to now program something on that. So yeah, pretty mad what we can get out of it.
Where's that one? Yep.
So we're on to OS1, sorry, OxCV. I want this to maybe be. Start changing maybe some of that behaviour again.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of like pendulum modes. They're great fun. What a blast. That's brilliant.
Really, really fun to mess around with, really, and I absolutely, yeah, just love jamming with it. So, I mean, again, yeah, just on that MIDI clock out, all we need to do is just sort of select. So maybe get some claps or something off of the 08. So with a really kind of modest setup, we've got some really interesting analog drums coming off the circuit mono station. We've got kind of more conventional samples, if you like, running off the 08, which is, again, really nice way to add maybe kind of claps and things like that. That's really simple just to kind of hook up like this. And then, yeah, we've got full control, really, of a modular system through sequencing, pattern behaviour, and also modulating that with OxCV.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really, really sort of powerful kind of setup. And, again, all of this stuff can be saved just on separate sessions there for us.
There's a video we made with the company that begins with R. It was like the tiniest studio or something, where there's, I mean, the modular stuff can get quite expensive, but there's not masses and masses of money's worth of gear here. But you can make albums on this stuff.
Totally.
There's so much depth to it. It's brilliant.
Yeah. No, it's a really kind of powerful unit. So again, one of the things that's probably quite fun to show off as well is if we maybe connect up. I think maybe showing how we can maybe process audio using the circuit monostation.
Yeah.
One of the things we mentioned at the beginning, that's a really kind of useful thing that I'd like to show off as well.
Yeah, let's just chuck the TR-08 through. I think that'd be great fun.
So if we go to just again an empty session, there's nothing going on this page. So let me just quickly now disconnect. So if I just disconnect now. So yeah, what we're going to do is if we, in the same way that I was showing you really a moment ago, so if I now select, so we just put in a note. Yeah. So if we now play, we don't hear it. So although I've connected up the audio, you're not going to hear it yet. So one of the things we must do is go to the gate length and tell the circuit monostation I want it to be a 16 step. Yeah. Which makes sure basically that the VCA will stay open.
Yeah, and you're just going to turn up the audio in.
You know exactly where I'm going with it.
Awesome.
So we've got the 08.
Flatten all of that quickly.
So there, yeah. Let's start adding a bit of the filth.
If you can get more level on the kick drum, it's always fun turning that into a big square. There we go.
Straight up techno with one connection.
Yeah.
So yeah. Really cool just to start messing with it. And exactly like you've just done there, let's start messing with the modulation matrix and start actually manipulating it. So again, because we've got all these steps to play with, we can start bringing things like rings.
Yeah, it'd be great effect just to have like on one step
just
or something.
Bringing in a bit of automation. So. Back the kicks decay off a little. You can add some sub sound to that. A bit of oscillator one.
Yeah. That sounds massive. Crank it a little bit.
It's a really fat sounding way of processing, you know, a drum machine.
Now that through like a massive PA in a club, that's going to sound incredible.
Yeah. And again, it's just something that I think a lot of people do process drum machines with pedals and, you know, not to distract away from any other work process, but the fact that you can use the really amazing sounding, you know, bass station filter really on the circuit monostation is just really powerful. And again, kind of without having to buy lots of other pieces of equipment, it's doing a hell of a lot in one useful little box. And I think the way that you can actually, you know, record all the automation, your filter settings, and, you know, really start making something very unique with it, it really comes into its own. Like, you know, really powerful unit for sure.
Definitely, and not even that big. Little space on the desk.
Yeah.
You can unite everything if you like.
Yeah, and I said more details. We've said we've recently done this How to Filth series on YouTube on our Novation channel. Yeah, just do check out more information about that. There's a lot of very simple little tutorials there, just showing you how to run things like the TR8, the 08, or whatever it is, to run that through the circuit mono station. So, you know, don't feel you've got to kind of dive through lots of different manuals and things like that. It's just, yeah, watch our channel and see a few tutorials, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for more information about the circuit mono station and for availability, yeah, check the link beneath the video. But I just want to say thanks very much for letting us come down and show it off.
Thank you. It's been absolute blast, actually. It's a fantastic little box, and I want one. Can I have it? I want it.
We can come to an arrangement.
Awesome.
That's great. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the Andertons YouTube music technology channel. If you're a guitar player, or you play bass, or a drummer, or you're into keyboards, you might like one of our other YouTube channels, and I'll put links to those in the description below. Anyway, if you'd like to find out more about the products we featured in this video, please click up here. If you'd like to watch another video from this channel, please click here. If you'd like to buy a t-shirt like the one I'm wearing, click down here. And lastly, if you'd like to subscribe to our Music Tech YouTube channel, please click down here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.